Dovolite, da začnemo še z predstavitvijo tretjega dela ekonomskih izzivov, ki se sooča z problemi trga dela in izzivi, ki nam počakajo še na tem področju. Poleg moje prezentacije, ki sem jo pripravila skupaj z Arjano Masten, Matevžem Hribernikom, Mitjo Perko in Ano Tršelic-Celan, so naši gostje v tej sekciji tudi Sandrine Cazes, Helena Scweiger in Peter Pogačar z Ministrstva za delo in se bomo sledili v takem vrstnem redu. Zdaj, če najprej spomnim na eno dejstvo, to pa bom pri teh mednarodnih primerjavah zelo kratka, ker bom podistila prostor Sandrine. Vodoma samo spomnim, da je raven ekonomske aktivnosti še precej nižja, kot je bila pred križno ravnjo leta 2008, kar se je nižji ravni gospodarske aktivnosti, pa se je v večini držav prilagajala na trgu dela, bolj prilagajala zaposlenost kot pa raven plač. Tako se je zaposlenost, tako kot vidite, zaposlenost še vedno precej, tudi raven zaposlenosti še precej nižja v leta 2013 bila kot leta 2008. Kaže se tudi ta slika se zrcalno kaže v velikem povečanju nezaposlenosti, ki je najvišja v Grčiji in Španiji. Na drugi strani imamo pa Nemčijo, kjer je bila v letu 2013 stopnja brezposelnosti že nižja kot v letu 2008. Poslabšanje se je bilo zelo izrazito, v večini držav izrazito za nekaj skupin na trgu dela, in sicer za nizko izobražene, za moške, kar je povezano v veliki meri z velikim padcem aktivnosti v gradbeništvu in predelovalnih dejavnostih. Drug segment, ki se jim je močno poslabšal položaj na trgu dela v obdobju 2008-2013 v večini držav pa so mladi. Če enkrat za razliko ne prikažemo stopnje brezposelnosti mladih, ampak delež mladih v populaciji mladih, delež mladih brezposelnih v populaciji mladih, vidimo, da se je tudi ta v večini držav močno povečala, zopet je pa najvišja v Španiji, v Sloveniji pa se je povečala manj kot v povprečju Evropske unije. Zdaj, tole veliko poslabšanje položaja mladih na trgu dela je na eni strani povezano s skromnim povpraševanjem na trgu dela, kjer mladi v primeru, ker imajo manj izkušenj, tudi so manj uspešni pri konkuriranju za obstoječa delovna mesta. Na drugi strani pa je to povezano z izredno veliko izpostavljenost mladih začasnim zaposlitvam. Tukaj, kot vidite, prednjači Slovenija, ki ima najvišji delež začasnih zaposlitev med mladimi v starostni skupini 15 do 24 let, kar pa je na eni strani, na kar pa močno vpliva tudi tako imenovana specifična oblika dela pri nas, to je študentsko delo, ki predstavlja kar 80% začasnih zaposlitev mladih in okoli 50% delovne aktivnosti v teh starostnih skupinah. V obdobju 2008-2013 pa se je obseg študentskega dela zmanjšal kar za 36%, kar je pač zelo fleksibilna oblika dela in se je hitro prilagodilo manjšemu povpraševanju. Zdaj, poslabšanje mladih na trgu dela se kaže tudi v povečanju deleža mladih, ki niso niti zaposleni, niti v izobraževanju ali usposabljanju, ki se je v Sloveniji povečala za 6,9% na 9,8%, kljub temu, da ima Slovenija eno največjih vključenosti mladih v izobraževanje in usposabljanje v Evropi. Če poslabšanje položaja poskušamo prikazati še s tem, da te tako imenovane net stopnje združimo še z deležem nebrezposelnih mladih populacij. Vidimo, da se je potem delež obojih v Sloveniji povečal z 11,4 na 17,1%, medtem ko je to poslabšanje v povprečju Evropske unije znašalo z 17,8 na 22,8%. Kaj je še drugega povzročila kriza in dolgotrajanje te nizke aktivnosti? Povzročila je povečanje dolgotrajne brezposelnosti. Kot vidite iz slike, se je stopnja dolgotrajne brezposelnosti v Sloveniji v obdobju 2008-2013 so stolpci močno povečala in v letu 2013 celo rahlo presegla povprečje Evropske unije. Podobno pa velja, da se je tudi v zadnjih nekaj letih v Sloveniji močno povečalo število zelo dolgotrajno brezposelnih. To so osebe, ki so brezposelne 2 leti in več. Tudi tukaj se je stopnja te dolgotrajne brezposelnosti po precejšnjem zaostanku v predkrizo v letu 2013 izenačila z povprečjem Evropske unije. Če smo zdaj odkrili že 2 problema slovenskega trga dela, se pravi naraščajoča dolgotrajna brezposelnost in pa segmentacija oziroma velika izpostavljenost mladih in brezposelnost, poslabšanje mladih na trgu dela, tretji problem nanaša na starejše zaposlene in sicer ima Slovenija tudi najnižjo stopnjo delovne aktivnosti starejših v Evropski uniji. Stopnja se je sicer povečala v obdobju 2008-2013, tudi v letu 2013 je, ko je začela veljati pokojninska reforma, se je nekoliko povečala in lahko pričakujemo, da bo pokojninska reforma vplivala na nadaljnje povečevanje. Kljub temu pa je v letu 2013, kot sem rekla, ostala najnižja v Evropski uniji z okoli 33,5%. Na drugi strani vidimo, da ima Švedska ta delež večji kot 70%. Zdaj, v takšnih razmerih so se začele pripravljati lanskoletne spremembe v regulaciji na trgu dela, ki so bile sprejete ki so stopile v veljavo aprila lani. Gre za zakon o delovnih razmerjih in spremembe zakona o regulaciji trga dela. Glavni cilji te reforme so bili zmanjšanje segmentacije in na trgu dela, povečanje fleksibilnosti in v moji prezentaciji se bom skoncentrirala predvsem na ta 2 cilja, medtem ko cilj je bil tudi povečanje delovnopravne varnosti zaposlenih in zmanjšanje zlorab, o čemer pa bo govoril naš zadnji sogovornik Peter Pogačar. Spremembe so bile seveda številne. Zdaj, če bi izpostavila najpomembnejše, bi rekla, da so bile najpomembnejše tiste, ki so delovale v smeri zmanjšanja varovanja zaposlitve. Pri tem gre za zmanjšanje višine odpravnin, za skrajšanje odpovednih rokov in za poenostavitev postopkov odpuščanja delavcev zaposlenih za nedoločen čas. Že te 3 spremembe, ki zmanjšujejo varovanje zaposlitve, delujejo seveda tudi lahko delujejo v smeri večje fleksibilnosti, dodatno pa se v smeri večje fleksibilnosti pa velja izpostaviti spremembo, ki je povečala možnosti opravljanja drugega oziroma dodatnega dela, ki je bila razširjena z zakonom o delovnem razmerju in povečuje možnost za notranjo fleksibilnost. Druga sprememba pa je uvedena možnost opravljanja začasnega in občasnega dela upokojencev. In tretja sprememba, ki lahko povečuje fleksibilnost, je povečanje možnosti vključitve zaposlenih v odpovednem roku v aktivne v programe aktivne politike zaposlovanja. Zdaj najprej, kako se je pokazalo zmanjšanje varovanja zaposlitve. Najbolj sintetično se da to pokazati z OECD-evimi indikatorji varovanja zaposlitve. Kot vidite, iz tabele so tukaj navedene vrednosti pred in po reformo in največja sprememba je bila narejena na področju varovanja zaposlitve redno zaposlenega v primeru individualne odpovedi, teda EPR indeks, kjer se zdaj Slovenija po novem uvršča celo pod povprečje držav OECD. Spremembe so bile tudi narejene tudi na področju v segmentu, ki ocenjuje urejenost začasnih zaposlitev, vendar tam še vedno ostaja nekje nad povprečjem Evropske unije. Kako pa je to vplivalo na trg dela? Zdaj, se pravi, kakšni so bili učinki teh sprememb? Zdaj, kot je že Boštjan v uvodu povedal, je ocenjevanje učinkov na tem kratkem obdobju relativno težko, kljub temu pa nekateri ni enostavno, mogoče se še niso vsi pokazali vsi učinki, kljub vsemu pa smo pogledali nekatere kazalnike trga dela, ki kažejo na to, da so pozitivni, da so te spremembe imele nek učinek. Tako je recimo kot najbolj dejstvo je, da najbolj značilna sprememba, ki kaže na zmanjšanje previdnosti delodajalcev pri zaposlovanju za nedoločen čas, ker če pogledate krivuljo se je medletna rast novih zaposlitev za nedoločen čas takoj po uveljavitvi sprememb začela naraščati precej hitreje kot število novo sklenjenih pogodb za določen čas. Kar seveda pelje postopno tudi, kar se kaže seveda tudi v nižjem deležu zaposlitev za določen čas v novih zaposlitvah. Ta delež se je znižal skupaj za 77% v letu pred reformo na okoli 72% v prvem letu po uveljavitvi teh sprememb. Največja sprememba pa, kot vidite, kar je zelo razveseljivo, je nastala v starostni skupini 15 do 29 let, kar je en korak v smeri zmanjšanja segmentacije, vsekakor pa to segmentacija še zagotovo naprej ostaja problem, ki ga Slovenija še ni rešila in ga bo morala še naprej se lotevati. Torej, kaj pa fleksibilnost? Torej, ali se je fleksibilnost povečala? Predvsem pri fleksibilnosti trga dela je treba izpostaviti, da je to zelo širok pojem in da se bo fleksibilnost pravzaprav lahko večja fleksibilnost pokazala v bolj ugodnih gospodarskih razmerah in tudi na daljše obdobje. Zdaj, z znižanjem varovanja zaposlitve je vsekakor vzpostavljen predpogoj za povečanje fleksibilnosti. To nam potrjujejo tudi ocene funkcije povpraševanja po delu, ki kažejo da lahko to manjše varovanje zaposlitve poveča elastičnost zaposlenosti na stroške dela in ima potem tudi seveda na daljši rok pozitiven učinek na zaposlovanje in na rast zaposlenosti. Na večjo fleksibilnost kažejo tudi nekateri kazalniki realokacije, vendar na te, kar jih nismo izračunavali na mikropodatkih, se kaže lahko še vpliv drugih sprememb, ki jih ne moramo izločiti. Ampak določene manjše spremembe se tudi v smeri realokacije na teh agregatnih podatkih so pokazale. Možnost za večjo fleksibilnost so lanske spremembe dale tudi na področju možnosti za drugačnega urejanja v kolektivnih pogodbah, o katerem bo pa potem več govoril na koncu Peter Pogačar. Zdaj, če zaključim še z izzivi, je zagotovo glavni in osrednji izziv na trgu dela, ki pa ni samo izziv trga dela, kako izboljšati situacijo na trgu dela, se pravi, kako zmanjšati brezposelnosti, kako spodbuditi rast zaposlovanja. Zdaj, glavni predpogoji so zagotovo ponovna okrepitev gospodarske rasti, strukturne reforme in izboljšanje poslovnega okolja. Drug izziv predstavljajo nadaljnji ukrepi za povečanje sposobnosti trga dela, da se prilagodi spremembam. Zdaj, če so se lanske spremembe dotikale predvsem varovanja zaposlitve in urejanja zaposlitev, je treba z spremembami nadaljevati tudi na področju večje prilagodljivosti plač, se pravi na področju oblikovanja plač, vključno z minimalno plačo, in na področju spodbud za delo, kjer vključno z obdavčitvijo dela in pa vključno z obdavčitvijo dela. Kot sem že rekla, so bili narejeni koraki v smeri zmanjšanja segmentacije, vendar ostajajo še določeni elementi, ki jo povečujejo. Pri tem velja predvsem izpostaviti to regulacijo študentskega dela, ki se mora spremeniti. Pri tem je pa seveda velik izziv najti neko ravnovesje med ohranjanjem fleksibilnosti za delodajalce na eni strani in tem, kako to študentsko delo pozitivno uporabiti tudi za pridobivanje izkušenj, ki lahko pozitivno vplivajo na zaposlitveno pot tega dijaka ali študenta, ki opravlja študentsko delo. Kot sem rekla, je eden izmed problemov tudi naraščajoča stopnja dolgotrajna brezposelnost. Zaradi tega ocenjujemo, da je potrebno okrepiti izvajanje aktivne politike zaposlovanja. To se je v lanskem letu sicer še zgodilo, vendar je treba jo še bolj okrepiti, ker so nekateri segmenti brezposelnih še vedno premalo vključeni v programe, hkrati pa tudi povečati učinkovitost. Pomembno bi pa bilo tudi, seveda velik izziv je čim bolj povezati programe usposabljanja in izobraževanja v okviru aktivne politike zaposlovanja, ki bodo zmanjševali trenutne neskladja na trgu dela in bodo tudi dajala brezposelnim tržno relevantna znanja, ki bodo jim omogočila čim hitrejšo zaposlitev v obdobju okrevanja gospodarske rasti. In kot zadnji izziv, čeprav ne najmanj pomemben, izpostavim še, kako torej izboljšati zaposlitvene možnosti mladih. Obstajajo tako imenovane mentorske sheme, ki lahko pravzaprav povezujejo oba problema, ki jih imamo v Sloveniji na trgu dela, se pravi zaposlenost starejših, lahko povežemo z zaposlovanjem mladih. Druga zadeva je, da ne samo, da se je treba aktivno politiko zaposlovanja oblikovati tako, da bo producirala tržno relevantna znanja, tudi vpliv podjetij in delodajalcev na izobraževalne programe je potrebno povečati. Morda je celo v Sloveniji potreben ponoven razmislek o uvedbi dualnega poklicnega sistema, ker vemo, da nam na tem področju kadrov pogosto primanjkuje. Hvala lepa. Zdaj bi pa predala besedo Sandrine Cazes iz OECD-ja, ki mislim, da vam bo več povedala o OECD in developments v drugih državah. Hvala.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning to all, and I'm very pleased to be this morning together with you and participate to this panel on labor market development and the policy challenges. So my talk will be structured around the following points. So I will provide you with an update of the latest development in the labor market situation in OECD countries, highlighting also some of the key challenges those countries are facing, with then a particular focus on labor market segmentation, has been already quite highlighted by Alenka. Then I will present recent reforms, in particular to employment protection legislation, which took place recently in OECD countries between 2008 and 2013. Finally, I will present some policy options to overcome and tackle labor market duality and provide some concluding remarks. To start with an update of the labor market situation, I will also go quite quickly here because I think you had already the main trends presented. So indeed, the labor market impact of the crisis has been quite unevenly distributed across country. So you can see basically here that the situation remains difficult on the whole for the OECD area, even if there are sort of clear different patterns between, on the one hand, the euro area with unemployment rate still at very high level, while on the other hand, and you have these two lines, Japan and the US, where the situation is clearly improving. So you have a declining of unemployment rates in a number of countries, while in the euro area, the unemployment rate is rather stabilizing. Despite this, I think it's important also to highlight the fact that within the euro area, the situation is also quite diverse, with clearly some countries where the unemployment rate is declining. That's the case, for instance, for Germany. So you have countries with not only unemployment declining, but also at quite low level. Latest figures we have for April 2014, we had figures such as 5% unemployment rate in Austria, or 5% as well in Germany, while we still have very high rates of unemployment recorded in Europe, for instance, Greece, 28%, Spain, 26%, Portugal or Italy. And here I added the most recent figures we had for Slovenia, that's April 2014, with a figure of about 10% in Slovenia. As Alenka also presented, among the key challenges those countries are facing, obviously long-term unemployment. Long-term unemployment has risen sharply in some countries, bringing with it the risk of a rise of structural unemployment, and that's quite worrying. For OECD as a whole, more than 1 in 3 unemployed persons have been unemployed over 20 months or more. This was highlighted, and this is about 17 million people. The largest increase took place in those countries which were particularly hit hard by the crisis. So we had very, very sharp hikes. For example, in Spain, long-term unemployment between the fourth quarter 2007 and the third quarter 2013 raised from about 20% to 50.1%. Very strong also hikes in Ireland and now in Slovenia, about 52%. The problem with this sharp increase of long unemployment, I was highlighting, is this question of moving to structural unemployment, but also the risk that workers became discouraged and simply dropped out the labor market. Another critical challenge is clearly youth unemployment. So you can see here on the chart that young people have been among the hardest hit groups, and they may also experience scaring effects. The problem is that very often, in particular in countries having segmented a labor market, young people get sort of stuck and trapped in precarious or temporary position and do not manage to convert their contract into more permanent one. So there is a bit of carousel effect, right? Instead of having stepping stone, you're basically stuck in very precarious jobs. To move now to labor market segmentation, temporary work, Alenka has also provided some figures. And by temporary work here, I think it's quite important also to highlight that it's not only fixed-term contracts, but also temporary work agencies, because I think in Slovenia it is a particular high percentage of people working in temporary work agency. So fixed-term contracts are clearly widely used in OECD countries. In 9 OECD countries, the share of fixed-term contracts is above 15% and up to 25%. What you can see also on the chart is that there has been, over the last 25 years, an expansion of those types of contracts. They are more and more widely used. In addition to this, the complexity of the institutional environment has increased as well. So it's not only fixed-term contracts, but a sort of myriad of different types of contracts that have been expanded. And as you can see, the main issue maybe is not so much to look at stocks data, but as flow data. And if you look actually at the share of fixed-term contracts among new hires, we looked at this composition, they reach in some country extremely high level. That is about 80% of the new hires are actually fixed-term contracts. The case of Spain, of Italy, France, and probably Slovenia as well. And the question here is actually, you can see when the crisis started to, from end 2007, etc., you can see that the adjustment as well took place on these types of contracts. That is, on the one hand, new recruitments happen on fixed-term contracts, but those jobs are also the first one to be destroyed. That's why it's important to look both at job creation and job destruction. And here you can see the top line is the Spain, actually, and you can see that those temporary workers mostly were the first affected by the crisis and the adjustment. So why to care about labor market segmentation? The point is that the existence of different types of contracts produce disparities in the labor market. That's one thing. But on top of this, those disparities are likely to last over time. So the first thing is that temporary work reduces job quality. So there is plenty of evidence showing that temporary workers tend to accumulate unfavorable conditions. So not only they enjoy less job protection and security. We actually, when reviewing the questionnaire that the OECD is conducting to construct the EPL indicator that was shown just previously. So when you look at all the very different elements of employment protection legislation, so hiring and firing rules, you can see that temporary workers and non-regular workers in general are much less protected by employment protection than regular workers. On top of this bit of, if you want, statutory protection they have, but in terms of security they enjoy. And we also looked at some subjective assessment about satisfaction and the perception by workers of job security. They also clearly have lower protection and security. They also have a wage penalty, that is, on average, if you compare the wage of temporary workers versus permanent workers, controlling by, of course, a series of different factors, you have in many countries about a wage penalty of about 20% on temporary workers. They also have lower access, if not excluded, to some social security schemes and pensions or other working conditions, or because that's not so much the case in Europe, of course, but if you extend to broader country, because de jure, the statutory rules exclude those workers, but most often this is, of course, a de facto outcome. That is, because there are eligibility conditions which are formulated in terms of minimum duration of employment or minimum contribution periods, those workers don't have access to full unemployment benefits or pensions, etc. As I was saying, those disparities on top of this are likely to generate persisting divides. If you look actually, and we calculated some probability of transition from fixed-term contract to permanent contracts, and here we have evidence showing that, of course, I don't want to provide a too sort of pessimistic picture of the situation. Of course, temporary contracts can be a stepping stone into stable jobs for many workers, but they're also traps for others. And we calculated 3 years transition rates from fixed-term contract to full-time permanent jobs for a couple of OECD countries, and those transition rates are lower than 50%. Finally, regarding access to training, and this is another kind of preoccupying result, we provided evidence that temporary workers receive less training on average. That is, the probability of receiving employer-sponsored training is reduced by 14% if you have fixed-term contracts. The cost of labor market segmentation, I have so far very much highlighted the sort of equity cost and social concerns, the job quality aspects, but not only. There is, of course, a cost of segmentation, which is efficiency cost. Having dual labor market depress productivity growth. There's been, many people have written on this. They also imply excessive adjustment at the margin, as I was explaining before. So in a way, in particular in countries which rely heavily on external numerical adjustment, when there is, for example, a recession, a case of Spain typically, you have a sort of over-adjustment, if you want, like very quick adjustment of labor market, which happen at the margin, so implying a sort together a risk of volatility of the labor market. So clearly, I think it's a clear objective that government should try to reduce the labor market divide and alleviate contractual labor market segmentation. I should maybe have highlighted more before that I'm talking here about the contractual duality dimension. So that is, avoid excessive use of temporary employment. How to do this? Well, one of the key arguments, key structural reform response to this issue that has been advocated both by theoretical models but also plenty of empirical evidence, is to say that employment protection legislation, so again, those hiring and firing rules, have an important impact. Not only the level of the overall employment protection legislation, what is at stake here is the structure, the composition of employment protection legislation. In particular, if you have a gap, an important asymmetry between the protection which is provided for temporary workers versus the protection provided by employment protection for permanent, regular work. So if you have an important asymmetry, and this is actually what happened during the late 80s, 90s in Europe, well, you tend to create incentives, of course, to firms to substitute temporary for permanent workers, so you have an increase of the share of workers in fixed-term contracts. That's the first effect. And the second one is that this large asymmetry between employment protection provision applying to the two different types of contract also reduce the conversion rates of fixed-term contracts. So, what happened then between the 2008 and 2013, I wanted to show you a chart that, first off, I didn't want to show you, but now okay, that's the one. So that's basically the employment protection legislation also that was shown to you before. So this is combining the protection both for individual and collective dismissals. So you have here, I don't know if you see it properly, but this is the EPL indicators for 2013 and 2008. And you can see, so in green, this is Slovenia. But the main element here that I wanted to highlight is that you can see this sort of overall general reduction of employment protection legislation in most countries. But contrary to what happened in the 90s, mostly in Europe, these reforms were mostly affecting the legislation governing regular contract, not so much temporary employment. So there has been, for instance, a reduction in severance costs and compensation for unfair dismissals in quite a number of countries. There has been as well an expansion of definition of fair dismissal, which is a critical aspect here, because very often what is costly for an employer, of course, if the worker go to the tribunal for unfair dismissals, the process may be very time-consuming, may be very expensive, and on top of this implies a lot of uncertainty. So this is something which is really affecting very much the segmentation of the labor market. So there has been a couple of reforms in that field, alongside with improvements in functioning of labor courts to make dismissals for economic reasons more easily. There has been as well an extension of probation period for new hires, and this is also an important measure for encouraging hiring of youth. And there has been also different approaches to the gap between temporary and permanent workers, and I'm going to come back on that aspect in a minute. Some countries as well, for instance, Greece, Portugal, and Spain, have reduced the scope and the cost and the complexity of collective dismissal. So what I made here is a sort of table to provide the main elements of those EPL reforms, which took place mostly in South Europe, because those countries were very much under the radar, of course, of the Troika, and were pushed for to conduct reform in the labor market. I didn't have time to go through the Slovenian reform, but I think it would be quite, we could easily add a column with Slovenia and also tick most of the different elements which took place in Slovenia. So you could see most of those measures were towards more flexibility, right? A reduction in severance payment, all the different things I mentioned before. Since I'm short of time now, I would like maybe to come to the policy options that could be proposed. So again, beyond the overall move towards flexibility and of general employment protection, here I would like to concentrate more specifically on duality and segmentation. So we show that this gap is really the key issue, right? So in terms of what could be the different proposals, the first one is, well, let's make hiring on temporary contracts more difficult and costly. This could be an option. However, so for instance, provide restriction on renewals, duration, and or scope of use of fixed-term contracts. This happened in few countries, actually including Slovenia. The problem is those measures are very often difficult to enforce, and they may be counterproductive, of course, if they are too restrictive, because clearly there is a need for those fixed-term contracts, and also this may backfire on the workers themselves, right? If they know that the employer knows that 1-2 contract and then it's over, the first person to suffer will be the fixed-term worker himself or herself. And so far there has been no evaluation also of such measure. So another possibility to reduce the wage between this termination cost between contracts is to introduce a single contract, single employment contract, I don't want to go into detail into this, but just to highlight the fact that there has been a couple of proposals actually in Europe, in different countries, to introduce such contracts. So basically, the spirit is let's suppress all temporary forms of employment fixed-term contracts and introduce one single, unique, open-ended contract with an overall level of job protection which is progressively increasing with tenure. Again, with such a proposal, there is a risk of introducing obviously excessive rigidity in hiring decision and could also lead to employment losses, clearly, and displacement on other categories. Here, this is dependent self-employed workers, that is people on their own account, right, but who are dependent because they work, for instance, for only one client, etc. So this is clearly not an ideal solution, nor the unions nor the employers would like, in any case, this proposal. So there are other discussions going on towards more unified contracts, which would have the same kind of spirit but would maintain different types of contracts still. Now, I don't want to go too much into detail into this. This is actually, this policy discussion will be developed in the forthcoming employment outlook to be released in September in 2014, where we examine all the different options. I think the main point I would like to make here is clearly what is needed is a convergence, and hence promote the convergence between the different types of contracts. So have more homogeneous employment protection, notably in terms of termination costs, obviously. So there are few examples in OECD countries which have already the same termination cost. The UK, New Zealand, Ireland, but obviously towards a rather low level of protection. And there are also other countries with maybe a more legal tradition and with more employment protection, such as Slovenia, which are actually moving into that direction of convergence. However, I think it's important also to recall that the convergence of employment protection regime is likely to reduce duality without negatively affecting the efficient reallocation, which is necessary, obviously, but will not eliminate all forms of segmentation. Typically, there are differences across social security regimes contributions, so there will be always other types of segmentation. So it's important to create the right incentives, right, to use different contracts. So maybe just to conclude, to say that it's over the past decades and even before the crisis, there have been a couple of structural measures towards more flexibility. While I have highlighted very much the role and the importance of employment protection legislation as a key structural instrument, I think it's critical to reflect in terms of policy packages that is not only concentrate on employment protection but also active labor market policy, unemployment benefit schemes, tax wage, etc. So combine the flexibility and security, as was said before, maybe not only flexibility for workers and security flexibility for employer and security for workers. I think there is both interest also for the employers to have some rules and stability, and the same, I mean, some workers may also enjoy having, depending their age or profile, having also some flexible device. And finally, I think it's very important to evaluate the impact of the different reforms which have been implemented or are still under proposal. The OECD has conducted an evaluation of the 2012 Spanish labor market reforms, which seems to go in the right direction. I would personally be very interested to read more about the Slovenian reforms, but from what I heard, I think it's also going in the right direction. Thank you.
We discussed this open-ended contract 2 years ago, I think, in Slovenia, but the outcome was not open-ended contract. So. Besedo dajem Heleni Scweiger, ki nam bo pa kakšen je pogled od zunaj na Slovenijo in regulacijo trga dela.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to present at this very interesting and timely conference. I would just like to correct Ms. Kajzer a little bit. I am coming from abroad, from the outside, but I will present the views of Slovenian enterprises and Slovenian people on certain aspects of the labor market. So I will just start by saying that we've heard a lot about the labor market challenges already. I would just like to add that the activity rate continued to decrease in the first quarter of this year, and labor productivity is still below the EU average. The reasons for that are many. Some of them are basically that there is low reallocation of labor among sectors and firms. There is also skills mismatch and high employment in state-owned or state-controlled firms, which tend to be less productive. We've heard a lot about labor market segmentation, and also student work has also been touched upon. And here I would just like to point out that I think Slovenia is probably one of the very few, if not the only country, which has a special regulation for student work. And perhaps my view is a bit radical, but my question is, why do we actually need this special status? Because if the argument is that students need to obtain work experience, then why don't we use the same argument for people who finish vocational training and are looking for their jobs? It might be simpler to just basically treat students as any other employee that will help them in the long run. They might not be happy with the same approach while they're studying, but in the long run this would hopefully lead to more for them to find employment easier, more permanent employment easier than they do right now. And the other thing is that a lot of the student work jobs don't actually require higher education. So if people are supposed to obtain experience that's related to their studies, there are better ways to implement this through internships or through traineeships. The other thing which could be a barrier to employment of youth and low-skilled workers is also the relatively high minimum wage. Now, there is obviously an issue in Slovenia with the fact that a lot of the workers, particularly in manufacturing industries, are receiving this minimum wage, but from the point of view of the competitiveness of the economy, this probably needs to be revisited and rethought. And a lot of the labor market policy measures seem to be quite ineffective, and I haven't been able to find any rigorous impact evaluation of the measures to see what really works and what are the cost versus benefits, and I think that's something that should be looked more into. With all this being said, there was a labor market reform implemented last year, and you've heard already that this has led to greater flexibility, especially as measured through the OECD Employment Protection Legislation Index. And these two charts show where Slovenia was before in 2008 and where it is in 2013. So I won't go into too many details here. I would just like to point out, let's say, three of the countries that I will come back to later. So Czech Republic, Slovakia and Poland, and their respective position relative to Slovenia in the charts. So some of them, they are relatively similar. They have all implemented certain reforms, and Slovenia is not, let's say, the most, does not have the strictest employment protection legislation among these four countries. But nevertheless, labor regulations are something that's quite heavily on the mind of the Slovenian enterprises. As some of you may know, the EBRD conducts a business environment and enterprise performance survey together with the World Bank every 3 to 5 years. It started in 1999. We have recently completed the 5th round. In Slovenia, we were in the field between February and September 2013. and conducted 270 interviews with top managers of establishments with at least 5 employees across manufacturing, retail, and other services. And as you can see from the map, we also have quite a good geographical coverage of Slovenia with these interviews. What do the enterprises tell us? So we have a lot of questions of the type, how big of an obstacle something is to the current operations of their business. Now this is a subjective question, and in order to analyze the responses, we controlled for the firm characteristics such as age, size, ownership, export orientation, and the respondent characteristics, so whether they were indeed a top manager or maybe sometimes they were someone who works in accounting. And controlling for these characteristics, what we find is that enterprises in Slovenia identified political instability as the top obstacle in 2013, with labor regulations following closely in the second place. You might wonder why I say labor regulations in the second place, because there are tax rates in the second place on the chart, but the problem with tax rates in this survey, which covers 30 countries, is that companies perceived any kind of tax rate as a big obstacle to their operations, regardless of whether it's actually low or high, so that's why we don't tend to focus on that so much. So labor regulations in the second place, and then access to finance in the third place. Now, labor regulations were identified as one of the top 3 obstacles in the previous round in 2008, 2009 as well. They were in the third place then. The reason why they appear in the second place now could be explained by the fact that economic activity has decreased, and that may have made the labor regulations more binding for Slovenia enterprises, because it is still difficult to adjust the labor force for reasons of decline in economic activity. It's not easy to dismiss workers for that particular reason. And the other things which became more important are also tax administration, I think for related reasons, and corruption, which I don't know, I'm not sure that corruption was actually higher in absolute terms, but it certainly weighs much more on the minds of the businesses. And so the hope is that perhaps businesses are starting to realize that this is something that has an impact on their operations, and perhaps this will in time lead to also the politicians realizing that measures need to be taken to reduce the possibility of corruption. On the other hand, workforce skills, which were quite high on the list of obstacles in 2008, are now perceived as less so. This could be again explained with the decline in economic activity, so the companies do not have as much demand for skilled workers as they have in the past, but also the fact that now the companies that do need skilled workers have potentially a bigger choice among the candidates, because there's not so much competition for the very skilled people. Now these obstacles are actually, labor regulations feature quite heavily on any type of firm, so they are important for young and old enterprises as well as small, medium and large enterprises, although truth be said, they are more binding for the medium and large enterprises, which will be subject to more regulations, and would also be somehow higher on the radar screen of regulators and inspectors. So that could be explained with that fact. And one thing that's interesting is that even though Slovenia does not have the strictest employment protection legislation among the countries that we surveyed, in this project, it is the country where labor regulations are considered to be the most serious obstacle. They're ranked in second place, so that's much higher than in any other EU member country covered. And if you remember the chart before, Czech Republic actually had higher, more stricter employment protection legislation than Slovenia does. So there's clearly something more to this story than just So one other thing which, at least anecdotally, one tends to hear often from people who are looking for work in Slovenia is that connections are really extremely important if you want to get a job, particularly in the public sector. So EBRD does another survey called Life in Transition Survey. The last round was completed in 2010, where we ask people how important it is to have support of influential people to get a good job in the government sector. And so this chart shows you that in Slovenia, more than 60% of respondents thought that having connections is either very important or essential to get a good job in the government sector. Now, I won't say that connections are not used in other countries of the world. Of course they are. But they may help you get an interview, but not necessarily guarantee that you will get a job offer. That will depend on your performance during the interview, your qualifications, and your experience. But here, at least anecdotally, one hears a lot of times that what matters is really who you know and what's your last name. And that's something that will also need to be addressed through higher transparency. Similar story appears in the private sector too, where in Slovenia almost 50% of respondents thought that having connections is either very important or essential to get a good job in the private sector this time. Again, I mean, this may be related to the fact that a lot of the companies are not necessarily state-owned, but state-controlled, and then people still think that you need to have very good connections. But also Slovenia is relatively small, so there's few degrees of separation. I'm sure that in the audience we can quickly find people who don't know each other, but then know someone who knows them. So it's perhaps some story with the small country, but not all small countries experience this type of issues. Another thing which is interesting is that now Slovenians are much more willing to move abroad for employment reasons. I remember maybe 2 decades or a decade ago, the story was that Slovenians are not really willing to move even within Slovenia for a job. And Slovenia is tiny. But this has changed, and in our survey, Slovenia was basically among the EU countries, the third country. More than 30% of respondents said that they would be willing to do so, and I think the statistics from the statistical office also show that this has definitely increased over time. Now, I don't want to say that people moving abroad for work is necessarily a bad thing. It's useful to obtain experience abroad and enhance human capital, but what the government needs to think about is how to attract these people back to Slovenia so that they can contribute to the Slovenian economy. And anecdotally, reasons often heard for why people move abroad are along the lines of, well, you really need connections to succeed in Slovenia, whereas abroad, what matters really is my experience and my willingness to work. So I think that's something that any government will need to address and think hard about. So I want to conclude by saying that labor market reform, which happened in 2013 and is ongoing, is certainly necessary, but it's not sufficient on its own. So it's not going to resolve all the labor market challenges purely on its own. There's more coordination needed between the different ministries and different areas to help with this. So some of the other issues are that there's still a mismatch between students' field preferences and labor market needs. Most people go to enroll in higher education, partly also because of the student benefits. And the ability to work, but the employers or the companies in Slovenia still tend to be more of the low-tech and medium-tech variety, which don't necessarily need the type of fields that people go to study. Business environment also needs to improve. That would lead to companies being more secure and willing to invest, to expand. As my colleague Jolanta mentioned, what needs to improve is also corporate governance, and greater transparency is needed, particularly in the public sector, and improvement in the efficiency of public administration. A lot of times one is faced with a situation where there is legislation which, however, is open to interpretation, and you speak to two different people and they will give you two different stories of what you need to do. So you're left to decide what exactly should be what exactly you should do, and you're open basically to basically being you're open to interpretation basically by someone else then who will review your actions. So there's a lot of work to be done, and really what's needed is the consensus of the politicians to tackle it. Some of these measures are not popular, but I do think they are necessary, and hopefully there will be people who will be brave enough to do them. Thank you.
Najlepša hvala Heleni. Čeprav je ura že 13, jaz predlagam, da še kljub temu, ker je bila pauza daljša, namenimo vsaj 10 minut Petru Pogačarju, da osvetli še določene zadeve, ki jih nismo osvetlili do sedaj z vidika izzivov na trgu dela. Peter, izvoli.
Najlepša hvala. Skušal bom v svoji prezentaciji nekoliko več se posvetiti cilju, ki je včasih v razpravi o učinkih reforme trga dela nekoliko spregledan, pa je po naši oceni prav tako pomemben. Vsi vemo, glavna cilja reforme sta bila zmanjšanje segmentacije na trgu dela, povečanje fleksibilnosti, ampak zelo pomemben cilj reforme trga dela je bil tudi povečanje delovnopravnega varstva delavcev in preprečevanje zlorab. Po naši oceni so vsi trije cilji povezani, vsi trije cilji so v funkciji večje pravne varnosti. Zakaj? Zmanjšanje segmentacije, dokler tisti, ki dela v prekerni obliki zaposlitve, tisti, ki dela na začasni obliki zaposlitve, o njegovi varnosti težko govorimo. Najboljša varnost je, če ima človek pogodbo o zaposlitvi. Če ima človek pogodbo o zaposlitvi in če ima pač delo. Zdaj, mi smo v prejšnjih prezentacijah, predvsem pri kolegici dr. Kajzerjevi, že slišali, kakšni so bili učinki pri prvih dveh ciljih. Dejstvo je, da segmentacija na trgu dela v Sloveniji se zmanjšuje. Zelo spodbudno je to, da se zlasti zmanjšuje starostna segmentacija, delež zaposlitev za nedoločen čas se je povečal zlasti med mladimi, kar je zelo pomembno predvsem zaradi negativnih učinkov, ki jih delo na začasni obliki zaposlitve ima, to smo videli, in na drugi strani lahko že govorimo tudi o povečanju fleksibilnosti. Pa vendar, da se bom posvetil morda povečanju delovnopravnega varstva in preprečevanja zlorab. Zaposlovanje za določen čas. Vsi vemo, več kot 80% pogodb o zaposlitvi novih je bilo sklenjenih za določen čas. Kaj je bilo tukaj nujno potrebno narediti? Določiti jasna pravila igre, in če so določena jasna pravila igre, je možen tudi lažji nadzor. Enostavno smo ubrali tudi pot, da smo pri pogodbah za določen čas tudi stroškovnega vidika jih obremenili nekoliko bolj v primerjavi s pogodbami za nedoločen čas. Drugo, agencijsko delo. Vsi poznate delo preko agencij za posredovanje dela. Ogromno kršitev je bilo na tem področju v Sloveniji, prav zato se agencijskega dela še danes drži nek negativni prizvok, pa agencijsko delo ni nujno slabo. Odgovarja, zagotavlja neko fleksibilnost na trgu dela, kar bomo videli kasneje, zagotavljanje finančne in socialne varnosti delavcev in strožje sankcioniranje kršitev. Še vedno trdim, da smo največ za delovnopravno varnost in preprečevanje zlorab dosegli s tem, ko smo se lotili vzrokov, zaradi katerih je do zlorab oziroma do kršitev prihajalo. Kakšni so rezultati? Ugotavljamo, da se je v letu po reformi povečalo število ugotovljenih kršitev pri sklepanju pogodb za določen čas. Zakaj? Ker so jasnejša pravila in je na ta način možno imeti tudi lažji nadzor. Enako bi želel povedati, da se je v letu po reformi bistveno povečal delež delavcev pri agencijah, ki so zaposleni za nedoločen čas. Če je bilo v letu pred reformo pri agencijah skoraj 90% ljudi zaposlenih za določen čas, govorimo o enem letu po reformi je razmerje 50-50. Zmanjšalo se je število prejetih zadev na delovnih sodiščih, ki se nanašajo na izplačilo plač, nadomestilo plač. To se nam zdi tudi pomembno, ker na ta način ustvarjamo sistem, s katerim tudi razbremenjujemo, bom rekel, naša sodišča in s tem se nekako prispeva tudi k zmanjšanju sodnih zaostankov. Pri agencijskem delu se mi zdi zelo pomembno poudariti, pred reformo še danes se agencijskega dela prav verjetno zaradi tega drži nek negativen prizvok, pa vendar, kar smo naredili, spremenili smo položaj delavca, tudi delavec pri agenciji mora biti zaposlen za nedoločen čas, za določen čas pa samo izjemoma tako kot vsi ostali delavci. Zagotovili smo, da je tisti, ki uporablja agencijsko delo, subsidiarno odgovoren delavcu za njegovo plačilo, s čemer smo dosegli, da uporabnik sam preverja, s kakšno agencijo ima opravka. In na drugi strani se moramo zavedati, da smo v Sloveniji imeli zelo lahke pogoje za ustanavljanje agencij. Mi smo v letu pred reformo imeli 215 registriranih agencij za posredovanje dela. 215. Z spremembo zakona smo spremenili pogoje za upravljanje dejavnosti, uvedli bančne garancije, s tem, bom rekel, na nek način omejili nelojalno konkurenco med samimi agencijami in pričakujemo, da po zaključku procesa bo na trgu nekje 50 agencij, vendar agencij, ki bodo izpolnjevale vse pogoje in na ta način bo tudi agencije si izboljšale svoj ugled in agencijsko delo ne bo več imelo tako negativnega prizvoka. Drug zelo pomemben element po naši oceni je, da smo z novim zakonom povečali vlogo kolektivnih pogajanj. Za razliko od prejšnje ureditve, ko je zakon dopuščal samo možnost višjih pravic, dogovor s kolektivno pogodbo, zdaj zakon na kar nekaj institutih odkazuje na možnost drugačne ureditve v kolektivnih pogodbah, kot pa določa v zakonu, v kolektivnih pogodbah na ravni dejavnosti. Dva sklopa. Možno je drugače urediti institute fleksibilnosti in možno je drugače urediti vprašanja glede stroškov dela. Analiza kolektivnih pogodb, sklenjenih na podlagi novega zakona o delovnih razmerjih, kaže dvoje. Kot prvo, da so socialni partnerji brez vlade v bipartitnih pogajanjih zelo uspešni in hitri pri kolektivnem dogovarjanju in na drugi strani, da so v večini primerov dosegli drugačne rešitve, kot jih določa zakon. Predvsem pri posameznih panogah se izraža, nekje so se dogovorili za večjo fleksibilnost, nekje pa za, bom rekel, zmanjšanje stroškov dela, tisto, kar je posamezni panogi bolj ustrezno. Tako recimo nekatere kolektivne pogodbe z vidika večje fleksibilnosti urejajo dodatne primere, ko mora delavec opravljati začasno drugo delo, dodatne primere možnosti sklepanja pogodb za določen čas in drugačna pravila glede možnosti razporejanja delovnega časa. In spet nekatere druge kolektivne pogodbe na ravni dejavnosti se pa bolj fokusirajo na višino stroškov, imajo drugačne kriterije za odpravnino ob upokojitvi, drugačne kriterije glede dodatka na delovno dobo ter drugačno ureditev glede pripravništva. Morda je to tudi neka dobra pot za naprej, da se da večjo vlogo kolektivnim dogovarjanjem na posamezni panogi, pa zakon dejansko določa samo tisti minimum, ki ga mora v tej državi vsak spoštovati in katere kršitev se tudi sankcionira. Še več, nekatere kolektivne pogodbe na ravni dejavnosti celo odkazujejo na še nižjo raven, da se lahko še znotraj podjetja drugače dogovorijo. Morda je to tista prava pot, da zakon določa osnovna pravila, vse ostalo pa se socialni partnerji dogovorijo na ravni kolektivnih pogodb. Zdaj bom morda v zaključku povedal naslednje. Zmanjšanje segmentacije vedno pomeni zmanjšanje pravic ene skupine in povečanje pravic druge skupine. Zadnjič sem dobil novinarsko vprašanje, ampak kjer so na vsak način želeli slišati, Ampak z reformo trga dela so se pravice delavcev zmanjšale. Odgovor je nekaterim so se pa povečale. Tistim, ki so prej delali kot po civilnih pogodbah, tisti, ki so prej delali na pogodbah za določen čas, pa so sedaj zaposleni za nedoločen čas, njihova pravna varnost, njihova socialna varnost se je povečala. Tistim, ki so bili pa prej pač na pogodbah za nedoločen čas, se je pa seveda, bom rekel, so se pa znižale pravice, ne pa pravna varnost. To je potrebno tudi razlikovati. Se pravi, sklepno bi rekel, da po eni strani govorimo o zmanjšanju pravic ene skupine, vendar je ta skupina ohranila in celo povečala pravno varnost. Opozoril bi še na, po naši oceni, zelo pozitivne učinke prenosa ureditev, možnosti, da se uredi s kolektivnimi pogodbami tudi drugače. Seveda na trgu dela izzivi za prihodnost ostajajo. Če smo za zadnjo reformo trga dela se spopadli z izzivom segmentacije med pogodbami za določen čas pa pogodbami za nedoločen čas, pa ugotovimo, da smo bili tukaj uspešni, imamo sedaj opravka po naši oceni še vedno z novo vrsto segmentacije. To se pravi med tistimi, ki delajo na pogodbi o zaposlitvi in tisti, ki delajo na civilnopravnih pogodbah kot, bomo tako rekli, lažni samozaposleni. To ostaja izziv za prihodnost in upam, da se bomo tudi tukaj sposobni vprašati o vzrokih. Kajti zakon je jasen. Zakon je jasen. Izbira oblike dela ni samo postrežna trgovina, kjer si bo delodajalec sam izbral, katera oblika dela mu bolj ustreza. Za vsako obliko dela imamo, za vsako vrsto dela imamo obliko dela. Potrebno se je vprašati o vzrokih, zakaj se tako uporabljajo oblike dela preko SP-ev. Zakaj? Ker lahko in ker je ceneje. Z tega vidika bo po naši oceni potrebno narediti pregled vseh oblik dela z vidika stroškov dela, ne samo z vidika davčnih obremenitev, ampak tudi z vidika, bom rekel, neplačnih izdatkov. Naslednji izziv, ki ostaja tudi v prihodnje, pa je bilo že kar nekaj narejenega, je ureditev študentskega dela, ki prav gotovo predstavlja neko distorzijo na našem trgu dela. Rešitev mora iti v smeri, da se fleksibilnost, ki jo zagotavlja študentsko delo, ohrani. Potrebno pa je ga stroškovno z vidika prispevkov izenačiti z drugimi oblikami dela in ne nazadnje s tem tudi zmanjšati prekernost, kajti tistim, ki delajo preko študentskega dela, v zameno za pokojninske prispevke priznavaš nekega dne tudi neke pravice. Glede zlorab se bo potrebno še spopasti z problematiko verižnih ustanavljanj podjetij. Brez Inšpektorat za delo nas opozarja, da je ustanavljanje podjetij prelahko, pa ne z vidika svobodne podjetniške pobude, ampak predvsem z vidika zlorab. Na drugi strani pa, kar moramo vsi vzpostaviti v državi, je ozaveščanje posameznikov glede pravic in pa vzpostaviti kulturo ničelne tolerance kršitev. Dokler tega ne bo, nam nobena zakonska sprememba na tem področju ne bo pomagala. Najlepša hvala za vašo pozornost.
Peter, hvala, res je bilo samo 10 minut. Če mi bo Sonja dovolila, lahko še vprašam za kakšno vprašanje iz publike mogoče, ampak kratko. Je kakšna? Izvolite.
Ja, mislim, da ste vsi govorci omenili študentsko delo. Zanima me, mogoče eno izmed stvari, ki ste jo pa spustili, je, da breme dajatev in prispevkov na povprečni dohodek v Sloveniji je bilo v letu 2013 42,3%. Zato omenjam prav zaradi tega, s čimer je gospod Pogačar zaključil, da se moramo vprašati o vzrokih. Jaz, če ta dva dejstva postavim bok ene ob drugem, se mi zdi, da je študentsko delo edina še fleksibilna oblika dela v Sloveniji, edina oblika dela, ki še ni pretirano obdavčena z davki in prispevki in se zato poraja nekako sklep tukaj, da je kvečjemu problem, da študentsko delo ni dostopno vsem državljanom, ne pa da ga moramo izenačiti z ostalimi oblikami dela. Pa mogoče komentar na to.
No, hvala za tole vašo razpravo. Ravno ko sem sredi vašega stavka sem hotel dodati, je pa dostopno samo študentom, ne? Pa ste potem rekel, da bi bila vaša istočnica, da bi moral biti vsem. Super, vendar, kot sem že uvodoma povedal, mi menimo, da je sama fleksibilnost študentskega dela pozitivni element na trgu dela. Problem pa je, kdaj predstavlja nelojalno konkurenco drugim oblikam dela in kdaj na drugi strani ravno zato, ker je tako cenejša, ker je nelojalna konkurenca. Zakaj pa je cenejša? Ker se od tega dela ne plačuje nobenih prispevkov in se tem, ki delajo v takšni obliki, tudi ne zagotavlja nobenih pravic, kdaj pa povzroča tudi prekernost teh oseb, ki to pač delo opravljajo. Seveda, možen je tudi vaš predlog, da bi vsi delali v oblikah dela, od katerih se ne bi plačevalo prispevkov za socialna zavarovanja, pa nobenih davkov, vendar tudi država mora nekako funkcionirati, ne samo študentska organizacija. Hvala.
Mislim, da je Peter vse povedal. Zdaj treba je ločiti seveda fleksibilnost, ker študentsko delo zagotovo je pa cenovno, ne samo po fleksibilnosti in konkurenčno, ampak tudi zelo pod cenovno. In to pa ne vem, če je prav smiselno, tudi z vidika bodočih pokojnin in sistem financiranja pokojninske blagajne. Tako da, še kakšno vprašanje? Enega vprašanja bi vas jaz povabila na kratko pauzo, 5 minut, da se tukaj preuredijo zadeve za okroglo mizo in po 5 minutah ste vabljeni na okroglo mizo.